right, hello, good evening, everyone. Let's call to order the City of College Place, July 7th, City Council Workshop.
Oh, first, we have a special meeting, and then
okay,
with just one quick item.
Okay, that's what sorry, I got to pull that. I pulled up the wrong agenda then. I saw it. Sorry, Lisa, let me find the agenda.
Fine, I can share it.
Sorry. All right. Okay. All right. So then I'd like to call to order the special meeting for July 7th, 2020 of the Electronic City Council meeting. Will you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Can I get the agenda pulled back up? Sorry.
Yep.
Okay. Well, since we have Mrs. Nyhagen here, would you like to lead us in a few words before we start our meeting?
I would. Shall we bow our heads, please? Our dear Heavenly Father, how thankful we are to live in America. And we do ask that you would bless America. Thank you for our council. And I ask that you would help us to make the right decisions tonight that will guide our city the way you want it to go. And we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Councilwoman Nyhagen. I really need two screens.
Sorry.
Okay, no, it's not your fault.
So it's just the agenda for tonight. I guess I should do roll call first. I'm sorry, we kind of skipped that.
Okay. Please conduct roll call.
Councilmember Bobbitt.
Present.
Councilmember Cleveland.
Present.
Councilmember Peterson.
Present.
Councilmember Selby.
Present.
Councilmember Sherman.
Present.
Councilmember Trope.
Present.
Councilmember Nyhagen.
Present.
Excellent. We also have our city attorney, Ree Colwell, city administrator, Mr. Rizzatello, finance director, Mr. Carlton, public works director, Mr. Hartwig, police chief Tamaris, myself, and deputy clerk Holm, and Mayor Hernandez.
All right, thank you very much. I think I pulled up the right agenda now. So we, let's take a look here, which agenda? So this is considered a special meeting, correct, Lisa? I want to make sure I'm pulling the one on. Okay.
Yeah.
So we need to approve the agenda. for the special
The
meeting?
agenda and the consent agenda. It's the only reason we had to have it is for the UTAC meeting. They actually have a meeting that really we would like to have the full commission available for tomorrow, Thursday. And so that meeting is prior to any other action meetings that you guys had scheduled. So we just want the council to confirm the appointment of Mr. Hanson to that committee so that he can be a full member of the committee attending the meeting on Thursday.
Got you. Okay, do we have a motion to approve the special meeting for 7/7/2020 and the confirmation of the UTAC commission member?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Order.
I'm sorry, Mr. Bobbitt, did you say
Point
something?
of order. I noticed on the agenda there was a public comment time we didn't have.
Oh, you are correct.
Sorry.
It's okay. Ms. Nisel, did we get any public comments sent in or requested to speak?
No one contacted me regarding public comments.
Okay.
Okay.
Do we need a motion to close it? Remind me.
You haven't voted on the consent agenda motion.
Right. So public comments don't need a vote. That's right. Okay. So we have a first and a second. Are there any questions or discussion items on the consent agenda? Okay. Hearing none, let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. The motion is passed. Thank you very much, everybody. So do we have a motion to close?
So moved.
Okay, we have a second. We have a second to close this special meeting that I'm just fumbling all over.
Second.
Bless your heart. All right, any other discussion items? Okay, hearing none, the special meeting is closed. Adjourned and closed. Thank you.
Now we can
Gosh,
move forward with our workshop. Sorry for that little glitch I added in there.
no, that I was running late. My apologies. Okay, so I would like to call to order the July 7th, 2020 Electronic City Council workshop at 5:43. Okay. The first item on the agenda is the electronic city, I'm sorry, where am I looking at? This protocol virtual meeting? So we already did the protocol, Lisa?
That's just for information.
Okay, so then we're gonna move on to Mr. Hartwig with the solid waste management plan update.
Thank you, Mayor. Every 6 years, the solid waste management plan has to be updated. A little history, the solid waste management plan is the responsibility of Walla Walla County. Several years ago, they made an agreement let me back up. Most counties own the landfill. We're one of the unique counties that the city of Walla Walla owns the landfill. And so a few years ago, there was an agreement made between Walla Walla County and the city of Walla Walla, allowing Walla Walla to manage the solid waste management plan. So Walla Walla takes the lead, but ultimately it falls to the county. Every 6 years, the county is required to update the plan. They asked for an extension, but were denied, so they need to move on with this. You had three attachments presented to you in the packet. Basically, I'm just going to highlight a few things. And this is found in the presentation to the City of Walla Walla's work session by Kai Bealey, their Public Works Director. They anticipate this the solid waste management plan to cost between $50,000 and $100,000. They base the share of that expense based on population. If it was the county, they would base it on population, which they did in the past. Right now, currently, we have about 16% of the population of the county. And so our proposed cost would be between $8,000 and $16,000. The city of Walla Walla is going to do additional work as well beyond the solid waste management plan. The first phase is to do a high-level study in regards to whether they should continue the landfill operation or go to a transfer station and taking the waste to a regional landfill. That will be done first, followed by the plan, and then they have some other stuff that they want to do as well. So they're just trying to get an idea of our willingness and our agreements in regards to doing the update of the plan, which we're required to do by law anyway, the county is. So I'd entertain any questions.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Hartwig? Okay, seeing none.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you. All right. Then next item is Mr. Rizzatello with the special legislative session 2020.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just wanted to brief the council on this. This is a moving target, but I'm on the Legislative Affairs Committee for this upcoming biennium through Association of Washington Cities. And it's split 50-50 as far as whether or not they're going to be doing a special session. So at first it sounded like they were going to. Now there's some folks saying it may be delayed into next biennium. Regardless, cities we're all trying to get ahead of the punch because the budgetary picture of the state has dramatically changed. Before COVID, the state had about $1 billion surplus, and now there's about a $6 billion hole that they have to fill. So in the document that's attached, you'll see various policy briefs, basically just trying to defend the revenues coming to the cities. That includes the affordable housing sales tax credit, the real estate excise tax, criminal justice taxes, things like that, and then defending state grant revenues that have gone to cities historically, like Public Works Trust Fund, Transportation Improvement Board, because the last time the state went through economic difficulties, one of the things that was done to keep the state afloat was to divert revenues from the Public Works Trust Fund, which is, it's won awards, it's helped a variety of cities with infrastructure projects, but the revenues that were being paid back into it really for the last decade were diverted to state projects. And only recently have the revenues started to come back. So there's a threat of seeing that occur again. And then also just trying to broaden Growth Management Act, figure out ways to really plug the transportation budget, because even prior to this COVID situation in the stay-home order, there was a very large gap from the passage of Initiative 976. So trying to defend essentially that. And then economic development, there still is a lot of discussions swirling around tax increment financing or bringing about the local revitalization financing program, getting that funded again. We should hear within the next like week or two if they are going to do a special session or not. It's pretty up in the air right now. But regardless, AWC is preparing so that when they do come back to session, we'll all be there to have the dialogue with them because this will definitely deepen the crisis more if this entire thing is balanced on the backs of the cities and the counties like it was last time during the recession. So with that, I just wanted to brief you all on this, and I'll take any questions.
Yep. Councilmember Peterson, do I see you wanting to ask a question?
I think it worked. Yeah, thank you. Mike, Lauren here. I think we had this conversation, I think, probably in the last month or two. So if you separate the city's government into operating expenses, and then let's call the other capital expenses, our exposure with the state does not impact our day-to-day operating expenses significantly, would you say?
I would say that's pretty fair. The only thing we are exposed to would really be streets because we do get gas tax. So let's say, for instance, if the state decided to divert our portion, that would cause gaps as far as street operations and maintenance goes. But really, the lion's share of our exposure with state revenues is capital, because to be perfectly frank, if it was not for State Transportation Improvement Board, College Avenue, 4th and Academy Way, C Street, Lamperti, none of those they would not have happened because we just didn't have the funds locally. So, and then a sundry list of other things, the wells, for instance, although luckily that money's all protected, but I would say our exposure with wastewater treatment plant upgrade. And then in the future, in the CFP, we wanted to look at working on reconstruction of 12th Street. All of that stuff is in flux if money is diverted again.
Yeah, so, yeah, it's a calculated process of if we can bide our time and the streets aren't getting any younger, as we said here, obviously, but it's one of these things, if we can bide our time for a year or two, it's not a direct hit on operations necessarily, staffing levels and whatnot. Yeah.
No, I mean, it's pretty minuscule. There is some exposure on the criminal justice monies, but that has always been very low. So that's not really a make or break. The only one it is would really be the gas tax.
Yeah.
So I mean, that could defer essentially like chip seal programming and things of that sort for a while. I will say the only thing, again, but this is the capital related, is we were sacking away the REIT 2 money to go renovate Lions Park, and we've been putting away that money and we continue to. It's just that I would say that would have an impact if they divert money away from Recreation Conservation Office or divert some of the REIT 2 money. That could put that project in jeopardy. So we just have to remain on top of this.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike.
Are there any other questions or comments for Mike? Okay. Mike, I do have one. I saw an email earlier this week from Department of Commerce that they were furloughing their entire department, I believe, for a few days, and that the governor has ordered all departments to do some cutbacks and furloughs. Do you think any of that's going to impact our ability to get any grant money that we either have been awarded or are looking to apply for?
I think getting the contract signed and turned back in, it'll take a while, but the good thing is the grants that we were really depending upon. So, like some of the curb money for Southwest Sewer, the ecology money, we scrambled to get those contracts signed and turned in, because then that money is obligated. And I have never seen them essentially pull money back that was already obligated. That has not happened. So I believe we are safe there. That's why we have hurried through getting the contract signed, because until the contract is signed, it's all fair game. So I think we are good there, I would expect. One thing I will say that they are doing with the furloughs is I think they're using that almost like as a shell game to essentially punt having a special session. My concern with that is that if they don't deal with this sooner, the cuts are going to be way deeper if they punt this until the next session, and then that's going to have major impacts on our capital programming.
Interesting. Okay. And we have no monies that we're expecting in from them within the next 45 days that we need to worry about?
Trying to think. I mean, really, it's curb money, it's a drinking water well money, but all of that is obligated. I'm expecting that, like, the reimbursements will be slower, but they already were a bit sluggish because of this whole COVID-19 situation. So that's just something where we're working through the punches. We've tried to make sure we turn in all of our reimbursements in a timely manner, so that way we can plan ahead for this. So, I mean, I'm not expecting really too big of a calamity on this. Because everything that was within our power to turn in, we have done. So I just think, as far as looming on the horizon, if they don't deal with this sooner, this is going to have a major impact on future capital programming. The only thing that we were going to try to do sooner that this has had a direct impact in is, if you may recall, in December we were awarded grant funds to go resurface Meadowbrook Boulevard in front of Walmart in Meadowbrook Plaza. We did get the engineering complete on it. However, we did get a letter that essentially ordered us to pause work on that project, and that they would allow us to basically resurface it next year, just because the gas tax revenues and all the fund balance revenues going into TIB were so far off of the mark from what they budgeted from. But we're still slated to do the project. It's going to be on a delay.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for all of that. Does anybody have a question or comment or follow up? All right. Not seeing any hands. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Rizzatello. Appreciate that. All right, moving on, Mr. Carlton's going to share about the 2020. Sorry, I hit my mute button a little too soon. The financial forecast.
So with the start of the Corona-19 pandemic, the city did do cutting projects, cut back, delayed hiring, tried to reduce spending in all areas that we could. As a result, we, Mike and Finance Department, wanted to do a forecast to see where we think we were going to be for the balance of the year. So what we did is we took the May financial actuals, and then we forecasted out June through December. And that's in the detail that was attached in the presentation. There's a lot of numbers there. I'll go through a few of them, but the summary is basically the main document. I know there's a lot of numbers there, and I'll go through a few of them. The secondary thing we did is we also looked at all the capital spending to see where we were going to be on capital, because of course although a lot of that is financed or grant funded, it does affect the fund balances. The main thing you can see here is based on the forecast that we're showing that we're going to be better off on total fund balance than we had anticipated in the budget. So it's a good thing, and I'll run through a few of the reasons why we think it's going to be there, and I'll also go through the capital, as well as talking about a few of the risks that we see potentially if revenues don't come in or expenditures go over. If we look at the current expense balance, you can see we're showing a ending fund balance of better than $400,000 over what we anticipated in the budget. What we're seeing this year so far through the end of May, I haven't seen June numbers yet, so I can't see if this trend is following, but we are exceeding our revenues in sales tax and utility taxes. For the first 5 months compared to 2019, we were $130,000 ahead in revenues on our sales tax. Utility tax was up, not very much, but about $20,000. And what we've done is we've taken those revenues, and it's so hard to predict what's going to happen month to month. So what we did is we took a lot of those revenues, we used approximately the same numbers or a percentage that occurred in 2019 for June through December. The numbers that we knew were going to be different, we inputted numbers that we thought were more appropriate. Sales tax is up. Our real property tax revenue is down about $51,000 compared to 2019. But I talked to the county treasurer, and they basically told me they can't predict the future, but they don't see any problems. November will be the big month, is the next big month of collections on property taxes. So we'll see what happens. We use we have a new part of bias payroll that allows us to forecast for the balance of the year. So we used bias to determine all the wages and benefit numbers for the balance of the year. One thing I did notice, and I don't know if you recall last year when we were doing the budget, I was a little concerned that our benefit calculation was a little overstated. And the finance department tried to prove me that they were correct in their numbers, but they are coming in lower than what was budgeted for. One problem we do in having a month-to-month forecast is that we don't budget on a month-to-month basis. We budget for the entire year. So it's very difficult to determine what your trend line is going to be or percentages. So this was first attempt at doing a month-to-month kind of modified budget. So it was a really good project. So we did have some revenues that we weren't anticipating that are included in the current expense, and that's going to be $89,000 from the CARES Act money from the state. We anticipate that'll be coming in, spread out over the next few months. And we also have a $291,000 contract deposit that's included in the revenues. But there's also costs included for COVID-19 to offset those revenues. And there's also the payout of that contractor deposit that's included in the expenditures. So it's not affecting the ending fund balance. So we're in pretty good shape there. The next one I wanted to talk about was the street fund. We do see a negative variance on the ending fund balance of $42,000. Like Mike spoke, we're worried about the motor vehicle fuel tax, and that was down in the first 5 months. In the REIT 2 account, Fund 306, we can see that there's a large positive variance in that fund balance. That's related to Lions Park $400,000 that is a delayed project that we won't be expending that until future year or years. So that balance will maintain. Under the street improvement 311, you can see there, that's all that ending balance in a positive is because of Northeast Cedar project and Meadowbrook project not going this year. And also there's some C Street reimbursements that are included in revenues that were anticipated last year but weren't received until the first quarter of this year. So you can see the beginning fund balance. The actual was 115,000, but the budget number was 362,000, so that we anticipated getting funds in and affected that opening fund balance. The next one I'd like to mention is under the water fund. Currently, we show our water sales and tax are to the end of May, we're about 91,000 ahead of where they were in 2019. So I guess everybody's staying home and they're using more water. If they use more water, they have more sewer, and our revenues are up in all those sources. We didn't anticipate that trend continuing. We kind of used the 2019 numbers as a benchmark. So you can see their fund balance is down a little bit compared to last year, but that's mostly related to the opening fund balance. I did not go back in and come up with some reasons why our opening fund balance is different by 300,000. Probably due to anticipated revenue in the last quarter, last couple months while we were doing the budget resulted in a variance there, and that basically flows through. Wastewater Fund 401, you can see sales tax, charges and sales tax are about $41,000 better May 2020 versus 2019, showing a trend. And that's all the notes I wrote down on the individual fund balance. The rest of the funds have variances. The rest of those are capital and debt service funds. So just depending on where we were at on spending prior year versus projects going through this year, there's some, negatives and positives on the fund balances in those accounts. But all funds are in a positive balance and maintaining our requirements as far as balances. And you can see the forecast anticipates us being at $15.9 million total fund balance by the end of the year versus what we anticipated in the budget at $15.3 million. That's the difference of the 548,000. Just looking for some other notes I had here. That's about all I had in regards to the operating. Is there any questions?
I do not see any. Oh, that's Councilmember Salvi and then Ms. Sherman.
Sorry, I'm having trouble finding my buttons.
Yeah.
I don't really have a question. I just really wanted to say thank you for putting this together, because every time I go anywhere or do anything, I think, what is happening with us because of this? What is happening with our finances? So I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Sherman.
So congrats on your citizenship. Welcome.
Oh, thank you.
And I had a question. So the final column that you have, the ending fund balance, that's just the variance, right?
Yes, that's a variance.
There's a line separating that.
the forecast versus the budget.
Okay, but really what you're projecting the year end is over on the left side under the 2020 forecast ending. Fund
Yeah,
balance.
the ending fund balance, the 15.9 million.
Got it. Thank you.
Councilmember Peterson, did you have something you were going to say?
I raised my hand and took it back down, but what the it's interesting as I look at this column, and I understand what you're saying completely as far as it's not necessarily its movement from beginning to end fund balances, not necessarily this shortcoming. You would say that those 400 through 431, many of those are capital driven also, correct? That's what you stated?
Yeah, it's actually the 403 to 431 are the capital or our debt service funds.
So one of the questions on the property tax, well, it was a property tax, and it was a small amount, but is that a delay in people paying their taxes because of economic uncertainty? Is that a piece of it? Is that fair to say?
It's that, but it's also the timing of when the county gets receipt of the fund, and that varies month to month. There's two large months being June and November, or I guess it's May and November. And we actually had good collections in June, so I didn't update the forecast with any of the actuals from June, because I didn't know if all the numbers were in yet when I was doing this.
So the month-to-month budgeting works really well if you do like an average and you put out. One of the things as we get more into this, that works unless there's a large expenditure that's happening sometime here in the future and we're not aware necessarily of that. And I think it's most significant probably when it comes to the Fund 001 current expense fund, where that's expense driven, of course, versus capital beginning ending balances. But we're not aware of a significant payout that would disrupt these balances that you're aware of.
Not necessarily on the expenditure side. More of it is on the revenue side. I'm going to talk about those risks at the end. But as far as the revenues under the current expense, one of the risks we do have is under the permitting side. And under the detail, I'll just grab it. Just give me a second.
All right.
For the permitting and plan check review services, we had anticipated about $150,000 worth of revenue in the first 5 months. And we only received about 34,000. You're about 125,000 behind budget in the first 5 months. John, he went through and contacted all the projects they hope are going to go this year, and he got confirmation from quite a few of them that they're going to go in, late third, early fourth quarter. And he came up with a number, and based on those numbers, we'll come close to what we had budgeted in the year. So if those projects don't go, we have exposure, I would say, around $200,000 exposure.
Good. Yeah.
If those projects don't go.
Yeah. It's interesting to see the recovery that comes back in some of these businesses as the pent-up demand. But anyway, thank you so much.
And we didn't average every single month for every single account. Where we knew there was going to be a major expenditure or a major revenue, we went and put it in the month we anticipated they were going to occur.
Very good. Thank you so much.
And then we can just talk briefly about capital. So here's a summary of the capital by the capital accounts. So I have the 2020 budget, where we were on expenditures through the end of May. The balance that would have been spent had we spent on budget is the middle column. And then what our forecast expenditures we anticipate for the balance of the year, and then that total expenditure, which includes the year-to-date plus the forecast. And we are off on a few funds, not huge. Well, there's some big dollars down in some of the big projects, and I'll talk briefly about those. But the general fund, we're slightly over. We did spend additional money on cameras, but those are grant. There's some $19,000 worth of grant revenue, and there's $21,000 worth of costs in there. So that pretty much brings us back in on where we had budgeted for general fund capital expenditures. Technology reserve, where we anticipate being under budget. For the year. There's some projects that, let me just grab, I got some other sheet here that has some notes for me. So on the technology fund, there's a number of projects that are delayed. There was a city council projector audio system for $6,000 that's delayed. The server in the city hall project was done on that project, and that saved about $11,000. The server room air conditioning prep for $5,000. The software for vacation rental tracking we had in the budget for $3,500, but it's going to end up only costing us about $500. And then there's a couple projects that we had in for the payroll bias integration system for about $13,000 that we're pushing off. So that generated the savings in the technology fund. Under the REIT fund, you can see we're slightly over. We're over budget. They spent a bit more on the chip seal than what we had anticipated in the budget. Not a huge amount. 309, the CDBG, sorry, I spelled that wrong. Mike, according to Mike, we're only anticipating spending about $125,000 of the budgeted amount this year on that project. Go down to, it would be, you know what, I have the numbers of the funds written on here, but not the names. So under the street improvement plan, you can see there that there's significant amount of money not being spent in there, and that relates to a number of projects being delayed. What Northeast Cedars one, that one has to relate to the legislative appropriations that we're not going to be receiving this year, so that's a delayed project. And we also have Northeast Damson's being delayed. Those projects total about $700,000, which basically makes up that pretty much most of that difference. And we received additional revenues on the C Street project that were anticipated last year, but we received this year. And that highlights the difference in those opening and closing fund balance variances. Facility maintenance reserve, we seem to be a little bit below budget on that due to projects that were going to push forward or not complete. Some of them came in under budget. One of the big ones will be the PD evidence building that we have in for $101,000. Well, we don't know all the costs, haven't all come in yet, so we're not sure where that project will end up. Under 320, the equipment reserve account, slightly under budget on that. The dump truck and spray trailer were budgeted for $157,000 and came in just under $100,000, saving $57,000. We're going to be slightly over budget on the water tender, which will come in a few months. budgeted at 150, will come in at 175. But overall, the total equipment reserve is ahead of budget. Under 410, which is the Water Capital Reserve Fund, you can see the spending there is considerably less than budget. The solar array project was delayed. We also have Northeast Cedar water infrastructure was delayed due to the legislative appropriations. And go down to 411, which is wastewater capital reserve. Those projects relate to Northeast Cedar infrastructure and dams and infrastructure, 40,000 apiece for a total of 80 that aren't being incurred. Wastewater treatment plant improvements we had in the budget for $2.5 million in 2020. Looks like we're probably, according to Mike, we're anticipating only spending about $800,000 this year. Southwest Sewer trunk line extension lift station was in the budget for $5.5 million. Right now, we're looking at spending for this year will be at 2.5. And we're still trying to finalize funding that project, but we have enough options that hopefully we'll have a decision in the next couple of weeks on what our funding source will be on that. But it is fully funded, regardless of which route we take. And that's about any further questions? So you can see in there that we anticipated capital spending of close to $18 million, and we're looking at spending about 11 million.
All right, do we have any questions or comments? I don't know if coming under budget is a good thing or
Mr. Rizzatello has his hand up.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add a couple of things. Part of what's causing us to be under budget is that several of these projects, because contractors couldn't work during the COVID closure, just because of corporate ordered freezes and so forth, projects didn't go as quickly as expected. So for instance, the community development block grant sidewalk project, I was hopeful we would get the sidewalks constructed this year. However, with delays with Anderson Perry Corporate, just with staffing and so forth, they were able to get to engineering and permitting this year, but the actual construction part of it will be in basically spring into summer of next year. So it's things like that that are occurring. And then also with Cedar and Damson, we were putting money away to do infrastructure underneath that street, thinking that we were going to get appropriation money actually deal with the street itself, but the legislative appropriation money for the street part did not come through. So with the health of our fund balances, really what the recommendation is, and this would be really in accordance with the budget blueprint that you all adopted late last year, is projects like the sewer lining, the 10th Street storm. We're doing good enough now where those can continue. And then likewise, hiring the stormwater engineering technician, because there's things where our stormwater permit where we really need the 2 staff people doing that. So that needs to come back to the front burner as well as part-time police records clerk in that position. The ones that I'm recommending we need to be very careful about, where if we see development actually starting to occur, we can hire for it. is the building inspector position, because I will say I mean, we've had developers say they're going to do it, but I've also had emails where they've been kicking it back the last couple of quarters. So that part is making me very uneasy about hiring an additional building inspector until for sure something is going for sure, because we've received emails that things may go, but I also received emails from a couple months ago saying, oh, well, it's going to happen in June, and it didn't. So that part does make me a little nervous.
So just the final point I had is our potential risks in the forecast number, more from not from necessarily the capital side, but the operating side. I think I've mentioned a couple of them. One is the property tax from the county. If people in their fourth quarter decide that they're going to enroll in their payment plan that the county is allowing, that will delay our money further out, or if people just don't pay their property tax. So far that hasn't occurred, but that's one of the risks. Sales tax revenue again is a risk, but then again, you know, we're ahead of budget through 2 months of the COVID and we're over budget. So with having Home Depot and Walmart in our city is definitely helped our sales tax revenue. As Mike mentioned, fuel tax revenue, taxes is a concern if the state pulls back some of that money. So that's not huge dollars, but it does have an impact. And the one I talked about earlier is the permitting side. If those projects don't go, we're looking at about potentially $200,000 to $250,000 reduction in our revenues under current expense. And that's all I have.
Okay, any questions? Councilmember Bobbitt?
Muted.
I have my hand raised. It's just a question on the details, agenda item details. You have information for consideration. Item number 4 says a freeze on budgeted personal additions, or is that personnel additions?
Oh, sorry, that's supposed to be personnel.
Okay. Just to clarify.
Anyone else? And for some reason, I'm not seeing the hands, so I keep looking. But Councilmember Peterson, I saw you have unmuted yourself. Was there something you wanted to say?
No, I just really appreciate that update. Like, you know, many council members tonight have already expressed that. I think it's good to see the warts and the blossoms. And so thank you so much. Good to have a heads up on some of that. Thank you so much.
Hear, hear.
Yeah, and what we're going to do is we're going to compare the month-to-month numbers against the forecast, just to do updates on where we're at in relation to what we forecasted.
Okay, great.
And another thing, a great part about our new budgeting software called Questica is that we will be able to budget month to month.
That's helpful.
So you get to see a lot of numbers.
I don't know. I think some of us like to see those numbers. We're data people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anything else? Any other questions, comments? All right. I think we've worn you out, Mr. Carlton. Thank you so much. We appreciate it, really. It's very helpful. Some of us can sleep at night now. Okay, last item. Mr. Rizzatello, you want to start the discussion?
Sure. So this is a discussion item, overing item that was introduced the previous council meeting, and this is just creating a diversity and inclusion advisory board for for the city. This discussion came up between Chief Tamaris and myself. This was actually something that was being discussed with previous Mayor Crowther and myself. It's just there were so many other things in the air that we never got to this, but we feel that things are at a point where this really is needed. And basically, this advisory board would just recommend strategies for inclusion, building of relationships, advise the council on strategies to strengthen human rights and so forth. This board would consist of 7 individuals. 2 of the 7 wouldn't have to live in the city. They could live in the urban growth area. Because that area, the families do attend the schools in the public school district. They do shop at our stores, so they are part of our community. And yeah, just an additional sounding board. We've had success with our additional advisory committees. A lot of this code was based off of a previous commission I was involved with when I worked for the city of Beaverton, Oregon, because it was created about roughly 7 years ago. And then likewise, there's similar boards in Kennewick, Pasco, and a variety of other cities. So this is before you for consideration at the next meeting, hopefully, but just an item for discussion at this workshop. The code behind it comprises about 1.5 pages.
So I would like to add that this advisory committee would be very helpful. It only adds the eyes and ears in the community for us. You know, we can't hear everything, we don't know everything, but it really will afford that. Not only what we're just not hearing, but within certain, you know, groups that are not willing or uncomfortable to share outside their group. So I think this would really help us understand better of what's going on out there and what we could do better. I think it would be very helpful. Do we have any questions or comments, Mr. Peterson?
Oh, thank you so much, Mike and Mayor. This is, it was interesting. We'd had a conversation regarding this previously, and I think it was this last week, had some inquiries from outside of our fair city asking what we were doing and how we were involved. And it was so helpful to be able to respond in the affirmative. And I want to thank you so much for your work on this.
Councilmember Selby, I now see your hand.
You mentioned the schools, and I think it would be really helpful to have some way to connect with the students, especially like the college and high school students. So, I mean, if you did college and high school, that'd be 3, which may be a lot more. So maybe you want a subcommittee or something, but I just really think adults aren't always going to know about things that are going on. And if you have a youth advisor, they can sort of sound the alarm before it gets to the point that adults are going to find out about it.
I would just add that for the last year and a half, we have that Youth Advisory Commission that actually has 2 students apiece from the university, Walla Walla Valley Academy, as well as College Place High School, and that's been very helpful where we've been able to get out ahead of things because of that. So we are getting significant input from the youth community here in town.
This is Councilmember Selby again. That's really great. And it just occurred to me, maybe the answer is to ask the youth to report, the youth committee to report like annually or something to this committee.
Oh, okay.
So you don't have to, you know, get a bunch of new people.
Yeah.
That's an excellent idea. And it's sad to say, but probably us adults probably don't know half of what's going on out there. So excellent.
Yep.
Although I try to think I'm pretty cool, but I bet the students don't. All right. Any other questions or comments about this? Anybody else excited about it? All right. Okay. Anything else for good to the order? All right. Oh, Councilmember Trope.
Quick protocol question. I was approached by several people in my neighborhood. We're at Garrison Creek Heights in the aftermath of the 4th of July. What's the proper protocol to bring a question to the group?
Do you mean in public comment or just a general?
So I went outside last night. A guy probably 100 yards from us had a fire. One of the two, I think, in the community. And several people were congregating around this. And one of the people knew I was on council and said, "What are you guys doing about this?" And they had a bunch of suggestions that I don't want to share here unless you guys are open to that conversation, but I want to know the right protocol to raise their concerns. They didn't want to come to the meeting. They said, "You're going, you do it."
Well, that's
So-
understandable. They trust you to represent them.
And the gist of their concern was there were a lot of fireworks the other night, and we had a house near us where I guess some sparks ignited the arborvitae, and 2 cars were destroyed, 2 houses were significantly damaged. I saw this once when we lived on the other side of town, and it's very difficult to get compensation from people who might be responsible. Very hard to assign responsibility. So the homeowners left footing that bill through insurance and things like that. And I'm just curious if there's a way to open up a dialogue to figure out, do you shorten the hours? Do you limit the type of incendiaries that were going out? There were clearly some very big things going off the other night. And this one actually came, so the people whose house caught fire was on the north side of 12th Street, and the fireworks came from the south side of 12th Street, somewhere down, basically down the hill in that area. So just curious if anybody else had any thoughts on that.
Well, I'll let Mr. Rizzatello talk, but I do want you to know that Sunday morning, he got an email from me on those exact same questions. So I'll let him talk about it.
Yeah. So the answer to this is yes, we are going to look at the revision to the firework code, because I think there are things we can do to augment it and make it a bit safer. Because, like, for instance, relative to our code, we do allow lighting of the fireworks for multiple days instead of, like, for instance, like just 4th of July. So curtailing it there, and then other safety protocol that way. So I am working with the mayor, and I'll take any suggestions you have if you want to email them to me as far as what this could look like. The thing I will say, and I would like to turn this over to Chief Tamaris for comment a little bit after I'm done here, because I know in one of the cases they are actually going after criminally for one of them. It's just one of the things where I think you saw an increase in fireworks this year, because I heard it out in the community, because people have cabin fever, because a lot of the luckily our municipal shows still did go on, but all over the place, plenty of places canceled their things. And if you cancel everything, people are going to find their own way of doing things like that. So I think that's why there was the stark increase, but we are going to work on a revision of the code to accommodate concerns. And Chief, are you available for discussion about 4th?
Yeah, Mike, absolutely. So first off, to Byron, I just want you to know that there is going to be some accountability to the person who was launching the fireworks and caused the fire. So that investigation is wrapping up right now. You know, I've heard talk about this. It seems like the last 3 years in a row during the 4th of July. And David Winter, Chief Winter, the fire chief's not here tonight, but you know, I heard him comment on this before, where if you make it illegal, then people will try to hide it and they'll still do it, which makes it more dangerous. We want people to be out in the street. We want people following safety rules. They're going to do it. It's illegal in Walla Walla, where I live. And guess what? It was, the sky was on fire. So it's going to happen regardless if legal or not. And I see Ree there shaking her head because she lives near me. So she knows it was pretty crazy. So I just think that we need to continue to educate and communicate. And frankly, we're going to hold people accountable when that happens as well.
Thanks, Chief. I appreciate that. I guess I'd heard anecdotally, one of the fireworks sellers in town told me that they had 3x the revenue from last year. So last year they did about 50,000. This year, one place did 150,000. So I do think this is somewhat a one-off, but I think the two suggestions I would, besides public information, one might be limiting it either to the 4th of July or either day, you know, shorting that. We had a week and it was a lot. The other one is something about the type of things they're using. Some of those were huge. And to be able, maybe curtail the hours, make it till 10 o'clock and then people only go to 11. But the other night here in our neighborhood, it was till at least 1:30. I know because my dog was sleeping with me, because he's really scared of them. So thank you for that. I'll send you a note, Mike.
Okay.
Oh, another note, Mike. In my neighborhood, they were going off until about 2:30. It was crazy. So
I just like to add that we did do informational videos like on how to do it safely and put water down. And I mean, we'll continue to do that, but yeah, we'll look at augmenting it. I will say personally, having gone down to the tent over in the Walmart parking lot, there were various types I have not seen previously. So I would say the variety has grown where that may need to be looked at a bit. Definitely haven't looked at that. So.
All right. Yep. The community can be rest assured we're looking at it. All right. Anything else? Any other topics, questions, going back to any of the discussion points? All right, see none. We will adjourn the meeting at 6:42. Thank you, everybody. And again, I apologize for my tardiness and for the very rough start. Have a good week. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.